Whoa, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And today we're talking about some sequels that you have been getting a lot of criticism. And unfortunately, I'm not here to add anything new to say that they are good. So I could say I'm
Uh,
beating a dead horse with the stick, but the Wachowskis already did that with the Matrix sequels because you had the Matrix, which I thought was a wonderful, perfectly kind of bow tied movie that gave you a clear beginning, middle, and an end. And by the end of that movie, you know the humans are going to win. But of course, they had to make sequels, and that's where things got messy. And then I think maybe like almost 20 years later, they made the Matrix Resurrections, which oh boy, and it's really sad why that movie got made too. Actually, it's actually kind of like personal and has to do with death. But before we jump into it, Mark the Movie Man Crosscheck from Special Mark Productions is here with us, and yeah, I asked like the thread usually when we decide what we're gonna do for overrated or not overrated, but unnecessary sequels, and I think a lot of people voted on the Matrix sequels. So what was your experience with the lead up to the Matrix Reloaded, and what are your views on it? Are you in the crowd of oh no, it's actually good, or no, we didn't need it kind of thing?
well, it's hard because the first Matrix surprised the hell out of me. First off,
Mm.
being the movie viewer and being the old guy or whatnot, I was not used to seeing Keanu Reeves in an action film like this, doing the action things he was doing, which surprised me. The story was fascinating. It was very cool. Not just the bullet time, but just in general. It was like in this amalgamation of all my favorite genres into this one thing. And you get the reveal and all of that. I got the 3-disc set of the soundtrack. It's 3 vinyls that they did of the soundtrack was awesome. Everything. I love the Matrix. So then, it was a little, you're like, okay, great. And then they said, well, Matrix 2, and you're like, oh, okay, you know, and it's got a great everybody. The thing is about Matrix Reloaded is that the thing everybody remembers most is the extensive highway action scene
Mm.
because it was impressive. When you say John Wick now, everybody knows what you're in for the action scenes. When these came out, when, early aughts, when someone would say a Matrix movie, you knew you were in for some pretty impressive action scenes. And that's what you got. And Reloaded was still good. You could tell that I don't think they had initially planned on a sequel. I think it was supposed to be just the Matrix, but then they came up with the other 2 after the studio said, oh, hey, and then they had ideas. They're like, okay, let's go this route. And you could kind of tell. And then you get to the third one, and this trilogy gets weaker as it goes along.
Mm.
Where it should finish strong. By the end, you're kind of scratching your head a little bit, and you go, we've taken this journey to come here. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
I mean,
Especially the
it's
ending of the third film. I was like,
yeah, well, yeah, that's what I mean.
that's
The
it.
ending of the whole Christ thing, and
Yeah,
Neo sacrificing himself for the greater good and being carried off to was the mother brain, the core.
yeah.
After they busted through and got past all the warriors and they actually make it to the central, like basically they're the
The
alien version
Deus
of
Ex Machina machine.
yeah, the
Yeah,
MCP basically.
yeah.
uh, of the Matrix to help stop them. And once he combines with it shuts down all the machines, and then all the human race is saved, and yay. But that whole story in 2 and then especially 3, you're like, it was okay because some of the action scenes, but by the third one, it really was a little worn out.
Yeah.
And you were right about, and I think they filmed Reloaded and Revolutions back to back.
Mhm.
So they came out within 6 months of each other.
Yeah.
and that can be good and then can be bad. And what, you know, Wicked fans found out recently is that when you have a film like that in two parts, filmed back to back, it's a risk.
Yeah, yeah. But then you could do the Lord of the Rings where you film all three of them back to back and each year and get a reward. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
but then
the
again,
Lord
Lord
of
of the Rings were more thought out than The Matrix was and Wicked was.
Well, and the Lord of the Rings was based off of already established material, 3
Mm.
books, 3 movies, pretty straightforward framework you could follow. Whereas the Matrix, they're kind of throwing pasta at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah. Or as many Smiths at the wall to see what sticks.
Or many
Yeah.
Smiths at the
Yeah.
wall, which, yeah, and well, the other thing too is it ended up suffering. The Matrix ended up suffering what a lot of like really great big movies or surprise movies end up doing is the gimmick gets played by everyone. You know, you had
Yeah.
Bullet Time, and you literally had Bullet Time being mocked in American Gigolo, or in
Oh,
Deuce Bigelow,
yeah. And
American
Scary
Gigolo,
Movie and like
and
everything on TV.
everything. I mean, they
Yeah.
even did it for this Super Bowl halftime show. They did a Bullet Time, which was janky as shit. They tried to do it
Yeah.
live with the multiple cameras, and you know, so I mean, it's one of those to where it was a really cool movie, but everybody parroted it so much after 99 that by the time you get to 2003, you had so many movies, you
Yeah.
know. And like I said, when you had Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo, I don't, it wasn't American Gigolo. That's a completely different movie.
Yeah.
Deuce Bigelow, you know, it's showing up there, and it was like, so by the time you get to Reloaded, it's been played out. The
Yeah.
bullet time and so you've got the action scene, so they got to try to come up with something else, and I don't think they quite ever get there.
Yeah, and I feel like it was one of those situations where the directors already told their vision, they told their story. They kind of
Mhm.
blew their load with the first film because the first movie, it wasn't the action that made it incredible. You know, that was part of it. What made it incredible was the mystery and the reveal. When
Right.
you don't know what the Matrix is, and they have like these trailers that are, and you know, back then trailers was just something you'd catch on TV once in a while, or maybe you'd see it on the internet. I saw the Phantom Menace trailer on a 56K modem at that time, and it took
Yeah,
a good 2 to 3 hours for it to fully download, but it was worth it. And then the movie came out.
the movie came out.
Yeah. And I remember when I saw The Matrix, the Phantom Menace trailer was attached to that. I'm like, wow, Phantom Menace. And then after The Matrix, I forgot about the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And then after I saw the Phantom Menace, I didn't want to accept the fact that I didn't like the Phantom Menace. So I kept rewatching The Matrix on DVD again and again. And that was like one of the first like home theater movies that I had. And
Mhm.
it sounded great.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like when you don't know what the Matrix is, and then they get to that big reveal and you see everyone in the mammal pods, it turns into like a horror film and it's legitimately terrifying. It's like one of the scariest moments I think that's in a movie that's not a horror movie. And when
Well,
you finally kind of like get to that second act in the action, that's cool. But then the whole point is like Neo talks on the phone, he tells the machine, I'm the one, you're gonna fail, I'm gonna save humanity, whatever. And then he flies. And it's like we kind of get it. We could just wrap it there. We don't need to see how they won the war. And if they did, they should do something different with it. But instead, they just kind of regurgitated like the same old beats. Like, oh, you like bullet time? Well, oh, you like Agent Smith? Well, here's 1,000 of them. You know, you like people dodging bullets? Well, here's Carrie-Anne Moss falling out of a building when a bullet's coming towards her. And yeah, there's a highway action scene, which is like the once like action scene that everyone remembers. But I'm pretty sure people maybe don't remember why that scene was there. Because the whole plot of the film felt like one fetch quest after another. You know, if it was like, okay, you need to find the key maker, so go talk to this French guy with Monica Bellucci for his wife. Now, and that was my introduction to Monica Bellucci, by the way. Or maybe I inadvertently met her in Bram Stoker's Dracula and didn't even know it. And then, you go and have to find the keymaker. Okay, now you found the keymaker. Now we're like, what, almost 2 hours into the movie? And finally, let's go see the architect. Oh, something finally happens. And then the movie ends. And that was the problem, was that structurally it just felt like the Matrix had you hooked from frame one to the last frame, and Reloaded you're getting bored. And then when I thought when we got to Revolutions it would be a one big action scene and I would be excited, and it was one big action scene but a very dull one that didn't even
Mm.
involve the Matrix. It was just shooting sentinels. So yeah, I was disappointed when I saw Reloaded. But I didn't know how disappointed I was, and each time I see the movie again and again, it's like taking Ambien. It just puts me to sleep each time I see it.
See, and I
Yeah,
don't think 2 is that bad. I think,
yeah,
for me, it doesn't stick the landing with Revolutions, and by not doing that, it makes your journey then you start questioning all the stuff you saw beforehand. I always am a strong believer in that even if a single film, if it finishes strong, even if it starts out weak and you're just kind of, but if it nails that like ending, it
yeah.
it sticks with you and you're like, okay, that was worth it.
Mm,
And
mhm,
with the Matrix, we had that in the first film all the
mhm.
way through. I mean, Neo flies off. You literally have Rage Against the Machine
Yeah,
singing, their name. A different machine, but still, I mean, it's Ray. It's like that soundtrack. Everything for the Matrix just came together and became fire. And it could have. You're right. It could have stayed there. And then you try to come up with this mythology in there and this philosophy, and it doesn't quite work. And then yeah, by the last one, you're not even in the Matrix most of the time. You're outside with the humans battling. I mean, if this was a web series, it would have probably been better. Or well, now it would have been a streaming series. I
yeah,
could have saw this.
yeah,
This would have made. I mean, that's where the Matrix was before its time and what they were trying to do for scope in that, because it would have made a great like mini series. Like, could you
mm,
imagine that?
yeah,
With Reloaded and that, and I mean, if you look at the films now, they're when you watch them, they're almost episodic in their nature, with their acts and where they're at, and like when you meet up with the Frenchman, and then the key, maker, and then architect, and then you get into the whole humans fighting in the real world type of thing. It would have played better out that way. But I mean, we're talking early aughts, so you didn't really have that yet. So it still felt like Reloaded and Revolutions were different films than the first Matrix. Like those two together felt like they were one movie, and
mhm.
for obvious reasons, because they shot them together. And the first Matrix was a different movie, but they weren't exactly connected. They were almost like
Yeah.
separate types of movies.
Yeah, it
Um,
felt almost like the Matrix, the sequel to the Matrix, should have just been 1 3 hour film. And there's
yeah.
definitely some stuff they could have, like a lot of expository dialogue, which I get it. The Wachowskis, they like their philosophy, except the philosophy in the first film is fascinating. And in the second film, it just feels like what it actually is to be like to sit down in a philosophy course. And that's sort of where it started to drain on me, where it's like I like that it has these ideas and these ambitions, but it's not really going anywhere other than places we know before. But I do say I do like the architect scene in Matrix Reloaded, because it kind of flips everything on its head, where he says there were 6 Matrixes before this, you weren't the only one, we just used the one so he could kind of be this idea that everyone had in order to revolutionize, so then we could exterminate everyone and reboot the system, or not exterminate, because that's their power source, that's their life source, humans are their batteries.
No, they just
But
rebooted the simulation and started everyone over again.
yeah, that was it,
Yeah.
that was it, yeah.
Yeah,
And
they didn't kill him, so but they ended up doing that. And yeah, no, I mean that part was really good. It was just you had to get all the way there
yeah.
for for that to get to Colonel Sanders, you know, and, and I liked that idea, especially being in IT for a profession in that into computers and that. I liked that idea. It made sense. It's just too bad it took a long time to get to that point. And then then when you get to the architect and that, you're like, okay, all right. But then you got revolutions, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah. So they're just gonna reboot it after he dies again? That's what I was thinking. Like, is this any well, and here's my biggest well, we can get to Revolution shortly because I'm almost done with Reloaded. But
Yeah.
yeah, like Revolution's sort of like when they made Peace of the Machines, it's like why would you ever trust them in a million years? But at the same time, the one nice thing about the expanded universe of the Matrix is that they have the Animatrix, which has this incredible like two-parter opening called the New Renaissance, and it's about how the Matrix became the
Mm-hmm.
Matrix. And if they were ever if the, after Matrix Resurrections, it was a huge flop, and pretty much Matrix is going to be dead in the water for another 10 years or more. But if they were to make a Matrix film, don't let people know it's a Matrix film. Make a movie like The New Renaissance, where it's about this robot who snaps, kills his owners, and he's living in a society where robots are slaves. And instead of getting any due process, he's immediately subjected to termination. And the other robots revolt and start fighting humans. They get into a war together, and in order to cut the machine's energy supply, which is solar energy, they have to block the sun with the clouds. So in the end, the humans and the machines fight. The machines win. They plug us into the Matrix. How great would it have been to see a story about that robot or about one of
Yeah.
those robots in that situation? And then towards the end, you realize, oh my God, this is about how the Matrix got made. See, no kung fu, no nostalgia, no bullshit. Like a real story about why it's important to be nice to our computers, or else our computers will kill us in the end. So, like, I would like to see that movie. That's
Mm-hmm.
something different. That's interesting. Or a different movie from the Matrix that we could see is what about the one that Morpheus tells Neo about in the first film, where he said he was the first one, he freed us. He like let's see a movie about that guy. We know he's going to lose in the end, but we want to see what started the movements, and what started this first Matrix that the architect was talking about. There are so many places you could go, but everyone's like, no, slow motion, Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, same crew. Although we have an entire Earths of people that we can tell, but we're just not doing it. We're telling the same boring character. And if we're doing that, make Neo a little more interesting, other than kind of being curious and wanting to do the right thing. Like, what if give him a moral conundrum? Give him
Mm-hmm.
something where he questions if he wants to keep fighting or not. Instead, we're just kind of stuck with more of the same. But yeah, in short, Matrix Resurrections. How many are resurrections? I'm sorry, there's too many
Revolutions.
re's. Yeah,
Number
the
3,
Reloaded.
revolutions. Yeah.
How many would
No,
you give
reloaded.
Matrix Two?
Oh,
How many
reloaded.
Guinnesses?
As much as I say it was rough, it was still interesting, and it added to the philosophy. The world. It expanded it a bit more, and I'd still give it 3 because it's still
Okay,
watchable. I think it's
yeah,
still watchable.
yeah.
I'd give
I
it 3 out of 4. It's not totally like you wasted your time. Like I said, there's the action scene in there. You get to the architect, and it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities and such
yeah.
with it.
Yeah, I'd say I give the movie. I want to give it 2.5, but in my heart of hearts, feel as equally let down with it every time I see it. So I gotta have to give it 2 out of 4 Guinnesses. Again, like if this movie was just trimmed up and
Yeah.
we got to the architect, or just something happens other than like a 40-minute cave orgy or a like 20 minutes of action sequences or another 20 minutes of philosophy that doesn't really go anywhere, I would give this movie more stars. But yeah, not quite on my menu. But then we get to movie 3. And I would say from the end of movie 2, there's a problem with movie 3. And the Matrix, I always liked the Matrix because it was believable. And it was believable because all these things, these acrobats, everything, these guys are doing it in their heads. They're plugged into the machine, they're
Right.
doing it in their minds. But then as they reveal in the end of Matrix Reloaded, Neo is able to take down the Sentinels with the power of his mind. So we're no longer merely mortals when we're on this earth. We actually have powers outside of what's possible in the virtual world. And that's where it turned me off. But then again, I will draw back for that and say they did that. The one big problem I did have with the first Matrix was that when Neo's dead the first time,
Mm.
Trinity says she loves him, and that's why she's going to bring him back to life. And all of a sudden, he turns into like Snow White, and then that's what brings him back to life. And I just thought, no, that doesn't make sense. That didn't make sense back then. It doesn't make sense now. But they doubled down on that with Matrix 3, where all of a sudden Neo can see the code in the real world, which I don't know why, but okay. And we kept going with all this metaphysical stuff that just didn't blend well with sort of like the gritty, realistic nature that the Wachowskis established in the film. But yeah, Revolutions. I was hyped when I saw it, and then I saw it, and I was confused because I was like, that was a lot of action, and it was very bombastic, but it didn't feel very personal. You know, there was a review quote that really summed it up the best for me, where it said it's like a video game where you have to shoot as many sentinels as you can before getting overwhelmed. And I'm like, that sums it up perfectly, you know, because half that film, they're cutting to these characters we met in the second film, but they're not very memorable or interesting. So when we're spending so much time watching them just shoot sentinels again and again and trying to get away from them, like visually, it looks great. Like metal, like CGI and metal blend perfectly. CGI and
Yeah.
grass, you had to get James Cameron to fix that. But yeah, outside of the visual effects of it, it was just very underwhelming, disappointing. And yeah, when you get to that ending, you think after the machines turned people into batteries for them, that they wouldn't trust them and they would revolt and they would, you know, really what they should have done with that final scene, or instead of just like saving a little part of Zion, they should have like simultaneously unplugged everyone, flushed them out of the machines, had like a huge rescue effort to save the bodies, and then you have to have people fighting against the Sentinels while the bodies are getting killed when they're trying to save them. And it's like, holy shit, now we got a million things going on. And this is, but they don't do that. They just kind of go, well, Agent Smith, because everyone liked him, we're going to put him in this movie and we're going to create countless versions of him. He hijacks the system. Neo goes in to stop and save him. And then, hey, he did the machines a big favor by getting rid of Smith. So we're going to free all the humans. What could possibly go wrong? Yes, and that's where it left me. And yeah, I just immediately saw when they said they peace and they just went away. I went, wait, that's it? That's it? That's what I was waiting for? Mm. For them to
Yeah.
just be like, all right, guys, you're cool. Thanks for taking care of Smith.
Well, that's the thing, is it was a head scratcher, especially considering what you set up in the previous movie with the architect, and just talking about how, they're running the simulation, and how Neo is just that kind of reset they programmed and planned on purpose. I mean, I loved all of that. And then you get into 3 going, well, no, Agent Smith is a rogue program now that is running rampant, and and now Neo has a chance to be a savior for both,
Mhm.
computers and people, and unite the people and all that. And I get what they were going for, but to see where the story starts and where it ends is a head scratcher. even between the two films, because like I said, you've got the architect who talk about this is all planned, and it's just going to go again. And then Neil's like, no, I'm not following your plan, or whatever he says. I forgot. But, he goes against his programming basically. And yeah. And then we get into the Mr. Smith thing, and again, visually, yeah, it's impressive. All three films are impressive. But when it comes to the story for Revolutions, it just feels like this coda to the end of two, not so much like the end of the entire. It's like, oh, this is like the appendix, appendices. It's like, oh,
like the
okay.
Godfather coda. It'll get better. I recut
Yeah.
it. No. Sophia's still in it.
And it felt like, but then again, with the way, especially now that we find out about Resurrection, and even between Revolutions and Resurrection, we find out the Wachowskis and their thought process on the Matrix in general. Like I said, I think if I remember correctly, they hadn't fully planned on a trilogy. They had the idea for 2 and 3, but I think they were it was like one, and yeah, like you said, they put everything into one. That, it almost feels like 3, they took this way just to say, okay, we're done now. We're done. Neil's dead. Okay. He's united the robots and the people. The robots and people are happy. We're done now.
Yeah, it was dead. Yeah.
it's like, this is our bookend. Leave us alone and leave the Matrix alone. And then he'd go on and do Speed Racer, which I think is a very underappreciated film.
I gotta see that one.
Speed Racer was, in all honesty, considering all the types of films we have out now, I enjoy Speed Racer. It's campy, it's cheesy, sure, but what they do visually and what they do with that film in general is just so much fun.
Yeah. I think that one is probably underappreciated. The Cloud Atlas I didn't like, but it has some of the best editing I've ever seen.
See, and I really enjoyed Cloud Atlas quite a bit. I enjoyed the story and how they put it together, and having actors do different roles in those different timelines and that.
Yeah.
And
except for Hugo Weaving with the Asian eyes.
Well, yeah.
But
at the end of that was one of those where I actually had conversations with folks in the theater. They had to kick us out because we were talking about Cloud Atlas. We didn't have that with the end of Revolutions. End of Revolutions, everybody was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I guess we're done.
It made, all you wanted to do after you got done with watching Revolutions was watch Animatrix again.
Yeah. You kind of wanted to be like, can they go back to war so it's interesting again? Because this is boring. Which they would, That's the thing. If they want to make a bookend to it, just blow the Matrix up and blow all the machines up and free all the humans. Now that's an action sequence that would be extremely complicated, but that would be so much more exciting than like that scene where like Jada Pinkett Smith has to like fly the ship through the closing door on time. Like, how much more exciting would it be if there was like humans being dropped from their mammal pods? Certain ships are trying to like pick up their bodies, while other ships are like, or sentinels are like shooting at them. And like even some bodies in the mammal pods you don't see make it. You can see like a bullet like completely blow someone's head apart, for instance. Like it's like, damn, like the audience sees that, they're gonna be like, oh shit, and that's gonna get you hooked into it. But this, it didn't do it because I feel like they just kind of did everything they wanted to with the first film. You had the court lobby shootout, which is my favorite action scene of all.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful action scene. Yeah. First time I saw that.
And then they kind of do like a diet version of it in Matrix 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course they tried really hard to have like the final Neo Agent Smith fight. And well, part of me likes it. I love the rainfall. I love the visuals of that final scene. I like how over the top crazy anime it is. But I also don't like how anime it is at the same time. Like, it's laughable. Like, Agent Smith just becomes like he goes from terrifying in the first film to a complete goofball by the third film. Like when he's doing like his evil laugh when he takes hold of the Oracle, and like when he's having his mental breakdown when he can't beat Neo, and he's like, I don't get why I can't beat you. He starts acting like a kid. At one point, he sounds like he's drunk. Like because he repeats the Oracle's lines to himself. He says, "Everything that has a beginning has an end." Neo. Oh no! Why I say that? And I'm like, what are they doing? But yeah, it was a lot of ideas that were interesting, but they didn't really give themselves the time to flesh it out. And even if they did, because these movies did take a little while to make, I just feel like they could have said their point with the first film and they could have told all their stories. And if you wanted to show Neo's journey to taking down the machine,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, some substantial rewrites had to be made, because at a certain point in Matrix Revolutions, we lose track of Neo and his own story, and now we're just cutting to all these other characters we just met in the last film, who I don't think most of the audience was as sold on them as they were with like Cypher, Rex, and Dozer and Mouse, for instance. Like the other guys, you don't remember. The only one I remember is that one kid, because he had like a great story in the Animatrix where he kills himself and wakes up in the real world, and he's like able to fully like realize that, which does kind of go against the whole line in the first film when Morpheus says the body can't live without the mind. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that kid proved it wrong. But oh man, so many avenues you could go down, but it's like the
Yeah,
movie didn't
there
seem to
are.
know it didn't know like what philosophy to hone itself on, like specifically.
Well, and I have to take a step back because remembering now, uh the Wachowskis, I believe, they did want to do a trilogy, but they had made the first Matrix. They ended up
Hmm.
developing it in a way to be a standalone film in case it didn't do well. The only
Mm.
thing is they put some of their eggs all in one basket and stuff
Hmm.
that they were going to spread out. Um, so remembering it now, because it's been a while since I remember the backstory with all of it, but they did want to do a trilogy, but they wanted the first one to play out differently. And
Mm.
in the end, production pressure from producers and such, you got to make Neo the one at the end of the first one, because uh I think earlier drafts of the script had it to where Neo wasn't the one at the end of the first
Mm.
one, to where he's discovering his potential, but he wasn't really the one. Because if you look at it, it feels pretty rushed, his movement from understanding the world to I see everything now. You know,
Yeah.
uh um, that feels like something that if you were fully planning on a trilogy, that's something that you have like at the end of two.
Mm.
At
Yeah.
one, you've introduced him, you introduced the world, you introduced that he's got better abilities than most of the human batteries going on. Have an epic fight with Smith or whatnot. You're rescuing Morpheus, and there you end your film before he becomes the one. And then in two, you could still do almost everything you wanted to find the architect. And he develops he comes to his full power halfway through two, and
Mm.
then he finds the architect. You could have done that differently, but I think because it was, the way first they had some compromises to make, that's why these next two end up being weaker. And especially the third one is the fact of, yeah, we planned on getting here. It's just, it just,
Yeah.
we did a lot of what we wanted to do earlier than we wanted to do. So now we've got to do this. And yeah, the human characters all kind of blend into one. And that was the kind of the biggest thing I had um with the trilogy, is where they establish, oh, you die in the Matrix, you die for real, like you said. And in the first one, you end with him becoming, the one. And I'm like, okay, he becomes the one. He understands it's a simulation, and basically these bullets aren't real, so therefore they can't hurt me and I can't actually die. And he comes to that, existential awakening. But then in two, you know, was it two or three where two, where he brings Trinity back,
Yeah, she
With
gets shot when
she
she's
gets
falling down
shot
the
coming out of the
building,
window, a
and he
really
puts
cool
his hand
shot,
inside of
and
her,
he's
and yeah,
flying and he's destroying the buildings. Everybody threw a
yeah.
fit about Man of Steel and oh my god, the collateral damage. I'm like, okay, if you actually die in the Matrix, you've got Neo here going at supersonic speed through town, blowing people away.
Well, not to mention all the guys in the first Matrix that he shot. Like when he's in that lobby and he's shooting, like those are probably just guys going to their day jobs, who are
Not
plugged in the
anymore.
machine. And
Not
Neo's like, for the
anymore.
greater good, and he just kills everyone.
Not anymore. They flushed a lot of bodies after that battle, and
Yeah.
so then he brings her back because he can do the code and he figured it out, and you're like, now on one hand they're playing it well because he loves her. On the other hand, I'm like, well, if he understands the code enough to do this, then where's your stakes then?
Yeah.
He could literally revive everyone, and some people say, well, no, because he loves her. I'm like, no, he literally figured out the programming. He did a whole flash with his phasing his hand through her and starts her heart again. I'm
Yeah.
like, and then not only that, but with the way the programming and stuff goes, okay, if you can understand it enough, why can't he just transfer now his knowledge to everybody else?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, then they could all be the one, and then they could
Then
all.
they could all be the one.
Oh
Um,
man, but
it,
then the movie wouldn't be very interesting
but
because
no,
then everyone
and
could fuck up the machine and win. But
and
yeah,
I get it. At the end of Revolutions, they wanted everybody kind of kumbaya, be happy. Hey, these humans who have been awoken, they're gonna live their life. People still in a simulation. They've got we're gonna give everybody red, blue pill choice. You could stay and be the battery, or you can come out with us. I think at one point they talk about giving other people the choice. Um, and it's like, okay, but we this is where we come, and it was anticlimactic, is
yeah,
what the ending to Revolutions was. It was really anticlimactic,
hmm,
considering all the strife everybody went through. From what I'm remembering, yeah, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to revisit Revolutions much, but I do
even
remember
especially,
when I watched it was underwhelming. It wasn't like
yeah,
it was totally bad. It was just like, wait, this is all of this, and this is what we come to.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
this ending, of all
yeah.
the different types of endings, this is where we're at.
Well, it's
And
so
it's
antithetical to the man versus machine sort of
right.
premise that they had. Because then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no, the machines are good." I didn't even know the Oracle was a program until they told me she was a program by like movie 2 or 3,
Well, they
and then
had
I'm
to
like,
do that
"Oh,
because unfortunately the original actress passed.
that's
And
right."
so they had
Yeah,
to come up with a explanation for the recasting.
yeah,
And because that, I do remember reading about how they had to change it up with their plans with the Oracle, because they had bigger plans for the Oracle. They
hmm,
really did. And then when the actress who was cast as the Oracle in the first one passed before they could shoot Reloaded and Revolutions, they had to change their plan with the Oracle. So I mean,
yeah.
it ran into bumps in the road along the way with what they originally planned to do, and you can tell in those next two films that is, that it was rough, that they weren't doing exactly what they really wanted to do, and so we ended up getting this.
Yeah, and it feels a little slapped together. Like
Yeah.
they just kind of came up with a lot of ideas that they thought of and put it because like you said, they put all their eggs in one basket in movie one, and sometimes studio compromises and meddling can be a good thing because you got a very tight knit film that was The Matrix. Now, granted,
Mhm.
yeah, Neo's discovery from being fish out of water to being Jesus was almost instantaneous, but I think like a very long 3 movie journey to getting there would have to have enough complexity to it for it to really work. And I just don't feel like the Wachowskis are the type of filmmakers who would know how to make a very talky movie for 2 hours that would keep you in it. Like that's something Christopher Nolan could pull off. But could the
Yeah.
Wachowskis do that? No, they wouldn't know how to do something without adding something sensationalistic, or else it runs the course of being boring or cheesy. Uh, and that's kind of where the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions kind of falls apart, because Reloaded is like the setup and then Revolutions is supposed to be the payoff, where it's basically like a big 2 hour action scene. But
Yeah.
even then it kind of starts out a little slow and then it gets to the action. And then when it gets to the action isn't in the Matrix, and the stuff that's happening in the real world isn't quite that engaging. And yeah, when you get to that anticlimactic, oh, we've made peace ending, that's when you kind of go, well, why did I invest all this time to just know that they're just going to be re-enslaved again by the machines? And
Yeah.
that's where, because the Wachowskis were like, oh, we're done with the Matrix. And I'm like, well, if you're going to be done with the Matrix, then you should have destroyed the Matrix, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, or just, could you imagine, could you imagine this ending? And again, I'm not faulting Wachowskis, because for what they had planned before they shot the first one, you shoot the first one, and then, as any filmmaker knows, once you start getting into that, especially we've heard stories with the bigger stuff, the first one's a blast. Okay, studios are in, their fingers are far more in it in 2 and 3, and they're like, well, we got to do this. Or you run into production problems where people get too big for their britches and think, oh, I need better money for this role that I barely had, stuff like that. I mean, so yeah, it's one of those things. But could you imagine, say Revolutions happens and they're racing to it, and Neo merges with the computer, but you come to realize that this was the plan all along, and the whole thing
mm.
resets, like boom, and the whole thing goes black, and you're like, oh, done. But then you go to, check this out. This is my brain. I will one day make a short film. But anyway, it goes black, say boom, big explosion, everything, just, you don't know if people or robots are dying, there's chaos. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
screen goes black. All of a sudden, a little light comes on the full screen, the cursor, and it's the White Rabbit. And then it's just a CRT monitor and the computer, and you find it reload Matrix program, and it does that, and then you end with credits to show that it just goes back into, it's going to go back into a loop,
uh
starting from scratch again.
I like
Um,
that idea. I think audiences might be like, wait a minute, we're what? That's not the ending.
no, but
Yeah.
it would, within the context of the film and the story, and especially with what they set up with the
What the
mythology
architect
with the
said, it would
architect, it
make a
would
yeah.
make sense. It
Yeah.
would make a lot more sense than the kumbaya robots and humans live happily ever after story.
Yeah.
you know
And
which
I
which that ending makes no sense then when you get to resurrection.
Yeah, okay. And I'm glad you all right, before we get to Resurrections, we
Yeah.
can quickly give our ratings for Revolutions. I'll start with mine. I'm giving it a actually no, not a 1. I'll be nice. I'll be nice. I give it a 2 out of 4 because that final fight, it has some great imagery. I also do like the imagery when they like fly above the clouds and they see
Oh
the
yeah, no, there,
actual
yeah.
sky, like, oh wow. But there's some nice little nuggets in there. But overall, yeah, like the same rating as the second one. I would go a little lower, but I think one's a little too low for it. So I'm sticking with the 2.
I'd go just a little hair higher. I'd go 2.5 out of
Okay.
4. I
Ooh,
enjoyed it just a little bit more for what you said. I mean, the visuals were still there. The action was still there as well. It's just the story is definitely muddled in that
yeah.
one. And again, a disappointing ending overall. I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't know what I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
I watched it. I revisited later that, and I understood a little bit more when you watch all 3 of them. But even still, it was just like, that's the solution you came up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's almost like they
you know.
give up and they didn't know what to do. And they're like, well, why don't they just make peace? I don't know, because I guess that maybe what the Wachowskis were trying to say was that once technology evolves, you can't get rid of it. You can't go back to the Stone Age.
Right.
So you have to coexist with it. But if they said something to reinforce that or to make that theme make sense, okay, but they don't. It's
Mhm.
just like, no, these guys are in the Stone Age and they're going to learn how to prosper. And um, they certainly
No,
made some babies during that orgy. So, they learn how
let's
to
just say
repopulate there.
let's just say the Matrix is what if Skynet took a different approach to, you know,
Yeah.
instead of nuking everybody, Skynet decides to make
Harvest
batteries
everyone.
out of everyone. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if there's one thing with the sequels, I'll just with the original sequels that I'll end with is that I get it kind of went through this thing that a lot of sequels, like the Star Wars prequels, have when I got older, which was people said, you know what, maybe we were a little too hard on it. There's some nostalgia towards it, and I think nostalgia causes people to be a little more forgiving towards something when really it wasn't maybe as horrible as they said it was originally, but it's still not good. I don't know if this movie has really aged well outside of the visual effects within the
I mean,
like
in
20
general,
years after it came out.
all three Matrix films are still watchable, and
Yeah.
that's why I don't, they aren't horrible. It's just when you're out of the gate with that first Matrix and it has such a cultural impact, that first one. I
Mhm.
mean, I think it didn't get put into the uh Library of Congress. I think the first one did. I'm not
I think
100%
so.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that because of the cultural significance of that film struck at the right time in 1999. You're getting the turn of the century stuff, and then you get this futuristic themed film, sci-fi film that just hit at the right point, that struck such a chord that, like we said, it was parodied and referenced years after, before there was even a thought of another Matrix films. It was referenced and pulled. It
Oh
was,
yeah.
and you don't get movies like that a lot, and
Mhm.
so that's a tough show to follow up with. And that's why sometimes when you get these films like this, I wish studios wouldn't immediately think of IPs. I mean,
Mm.
I didn't care for Weapons, but people love Weapons. Mad props to you. Folks
Yeah,
loved
I didn't care
Weapons.
for it much either. And
You
the
know,
part I
and
didn't
and
like is the part everyone loved.
and I don't fault them for that.
Yeah.
I don't fault anyone for loving whatever you love. We all see
Yeah.
something differently. That's what's great about movies. But that film, just as before the dust was settling and the fire turned to embers because it was a hot talk, they're talking, oh, we're going to do a spinoff now of the witch character. We're going to do the spin. I'm like, give it some time to breathe. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's the old guy in me. I admit I'm 50 and but go back to the days when most films, especially genre films, they thought they were going to be one and done. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's why the Matrix, that you didn't plan on a sequel. You're not Star Wars. Star Wars and Indy and Back to the Future were films that were anomalies to have actual trilogies.
Yeah.
The most that people ever thought of for sequels weren't really sequels. They were just with the same character, and that was the 007 films.
Mhm. Yeah.
James Bond. Okay, James Bond's coming out, but you don't need to see the other James Bond films to know that it's just that character in a different franchise, in a different
Yeah.
story.
Until the Daniel Craig ones, and then they kind of made him a little more
And
like
then yeah, when
blended,
Daniel,
but actually it kind of worked. But you know, at
there
the
was
same
there
time, I kind
was
of like the anthology of it.
there was some continuity, loose continuity with the other Bond films, like with the Roger Moore, with Sean Connery. You had Dr. No, and you had the Spectre story. Yeah, I mean, so there was some carryover, but it wasn't the main story.
Yeah.
Having a trilogy or having a big film and thinking, oh, we're gonna get two more films out of this was an anomaly. Even
Yeah.
into the 90s, you were a little bit more looking at it. Like you said, you had the prequels, but people are like, your name's not Lucas. Why are you planning an IP already? So
Yeah.
you get the Matrix with these guys, these filmmakers who people weren't familiar with at all, coming out with this just mind-blowing film for the time. It's like, yeah, and how do you follow up with that? You don't. You let it sit, you let it breathe, but
Yeah.
they didn't, because when you start getting into the 2000s, that's when studios start thinking
Mhm.
franchise, IP, trilogy, whatever genre thing they came up with. How can we make this more than one movie? And you
Yeah.
can see it starting to happen around the turn of the century. They suddenly, studios picked up on it, and they're like, "Oh, we can turn this into a whole franchise." And then
Yeah, everything's 3 movies now,
now, yeah.
and yeah, and it's like we did use it was nice in the old days when sequels were just I think it was a very kinda life lesson when the Star Wars prequels were a disappointment and the Matrix sequels were a disappointment, where
Mhm.
we saw that, oh, just because the original creator is involved doesn't necessarily mean something's going to be good.
Right.
And in fact, it could be the opposite, where the creator has terrible ideas
Mhm.
that luckily got axed when they were making the good movie, but now they're bringing all those ideas back and they're not working very well for
Uh,
this movie.
and then you get into the legacy sequels, which became popular in the last 10, 15 years as us Gen
Ugh,
Xers were getting
yeah.
older, and all us Gen X. I'm gonna put it out there, because I won't speak for my entire generation, because I'm a little bit on the tail end of Gen X, but still, us 50-year-olds, when we saw those original trilogies in that, like the Indiana Jones trilogy and Back to the Future and the Matrix and
Yeah.
that, we were fine with those stories. We never
Yeah.
said, "Wow, I would love to see another movie with those characters in it."
Yeah. They
None of us.
literally closed the curtain on
They
Last
would
Crusade
they
with when they're
closed it with
riding out in the sunset. Yeah.
and in this one with the revolution, Neo dies. Humans are happy. We're good.
Yeah.
And then this,
Yeah.
and
Let's get into
and then
Resurrections.
Resurrections comes along because legacy sequels suddenly become a huge thing.
Mhm.
The Wachowskis, they were going to do if I remember the story correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I've probably been wrong this whole episode, and I apologize, everyone. I've been trying to pull a lot from memory, but if I remember correctly, they were going to do a Matrix sequel regardless, a legacy
Mm.
sequel, and so they got, who's it? Lana, was it?
Lana, there's Lana
Lana?
and Lily. I think Lana was the one who wanted to do Matrix
Right, because
Resurrections.
Lily had passed. Didn't she?
Uh, no, Lily's alive. What happened is their parents had passed,
Parents, that's what it was, the
and
parents. I'm sorry,
yeah,
not her, the parents. Oh, man. See, I told you my
no,
memories,
that's
my re
okay. But yeah, Lana basically said I couldn't bring my parents back, and every single year Warner
right.
Brothers would ask us to bring the Matrix back, and eventually I just said, okay, I can't bring my mom and dad back, but I can bring Neo and Trinity back,
Right, well,
and that's
they
very
were gonna
sad,
do
but
they
yeah,
were gonna do the sequel anyway, so the fact that, she was able to look at it and have it be very therapeutic, that's cool, but what we get was even more of a head scratcher than the revolutions, because now we have Neo, who programmed himself to forget, and he's living in the Matrix, which is still around because some people chose not to leave the Matrix, and he's there and he's the one, and another anomaly's coming up, and they know he's the one, and they're coming after him, and he's got to wake up. And oh man, this, you know and then you get Trinity in there, and then they start revisiting original scenes from the first film,
yeah.
which made no sense either.
And they bring Agent Smith back again, but
They
this
bring
time
it
it's like there's some dorky actor, and yeah, I mean,
yeah, they literally pull Agent Smith off of an old floppy, uh and yeah, and you got a different Morpheus,
yeah,
and it's just, it's one of those things where it's a very odd film. And I love Neil Patrick Harris, and I didn't mind him as a villain necessarily. It wasn't his performance or his character. It was the story that was written around all of these characters that just didn't fit.
Yeah.
It didn't fit the stuff from the previous films at all.
Well, and the worst part is that they're restarting everything when really they could just go with different characters
Yeah.
or go with a prequel, go with the other ones, go with how the Matrix was made, go with something else, but instead they resurrect Jesus or Neo by like shoving a light bulb in his mouth or something like that. And then they bring back like Trinity the same way, and yeah, the fact that like they program it where Neo doesn't know where he is, and then when he finds out everything and rediscovers himself, Neil Patrick Harris, Dookie Howser turns out to be the big baddie of the movie. And there's a lot of scenes where the movie's being very meta. Like there's a
Yes.
scene where a bunch of
Yes.
people are fighting and a character saying to the screen, "Oh, you missed those great action scenes and this and that." And I'm like, "Yeah. Well, guess what? If the action is going to be choppy and not as good, and Keanu Reeves is too old and his only move throughout the movie is to do a Hadouken, then the movie isn't that engaging. And I don't care how much Lana's telling the audience, "Oh, I'm aware of this." Well, if you're aware of it, then bleeping fix it, because this is just an amalgamation of nostalgia crammed into a package because Warner Brothers doesn't want to move on past the Matrix. You had a therapeutic reason for making that. I understand, but none of this is really translating into a necessary sequel. As a matter of fact, it's so blatantly unnecessary that it actually kind of hurts the other movies. It made me like the sequels a little more, which is something I never thought. I remember when I saw that movie, I went to the first press screening. It was so horrible. And I think I messaged you guys on Earth Mightiest
Yeah.
Critics that day. And I'm like, this movie was fucking terrible. I can't believe it. And then I went to go see it again because I wanted to make sure before I put anything on the page that it was as bad as I thought it was. And when I saw it again, it was even worse because not only was the movie just repackaging old elements of nostalgia and was missing half the cast because they probably read the script and went, "Oh, fuck that," and decided not to do it. But it was also because the action wasn't good. And
No.
it's the
No.
Matrix. The action should be good in the Matrix. And
No,
instead
the
it was filmed like any other action movie. And that's where it really turned me off.
yeah, no, the action sequences weren't as creative. Um and things just it was it all the things that make you cringe when you hear or see about a legacy sequel or them dusting off an IP are evident in this one.
Mm.
If you want a good legacy sequel, you could say legacy sequel, but basically, doing a sequel from a movie that's older than 10 years now, but that's not a time limit anymore. But say you're trying to do a sequel for a film, the last film came out 10, 15 years ago. Blade Runner did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably one
Beautiful.
of the best ways you could do it.
Yeah.
Well, is that way. That's really how you do. And then personally for me, I enjoy the first two of the sequel trilogy. The third one, I like it for Ray. I think Ray gets a bad rap and just some bad
Yeah.
writing, but I think her character was very interesting and where they were going to go with it. And then the fandom, well, that's a whole nother story, but the fandom kind of ruined
Well, I thought Daisy
Rise.
Ridley made a great performance. I just don't
Oh,
think
shit.
they
Her
did a great
perform
job writing
Well,
around that
no,
character.
because they listened too much. They listened too much to the internet after Last Jedi. I will be a
Yeah.
defender of Last Jedi. I'll stand on that hill. If I lose people, people want to flame me or what, that's fine. I think they were going to take it in some very interesting directions.
Yeah.
And much like what we see with even in Revolutions, but especially here in Resurrection, I think they want to do interesting direction and the studio doesn't let them. They listen
Mhm.
or decide that no, we've got to, like in Matrix, we've got to have Trinity see herself, and then we could do a young de-aging thing, and we could have her where she's watching, you're doing that, and it's like, no, if you're gonna bring back characters, give me a new story, and that's where I think Blade Runner did it right.
Yeah,
I
because
I flinched when they said, "Oh, we're going to do another one," and I'm not a huge Gosling fan, but I like him in
yeah.
that one. But I loved the story they came up with in
Yeah.
that one.
Well, that movie hooked me right away when he's fighting Dave Bautista, because
Yeah,
Bautista is supposed to be another replicant, and then he
yeah,
says the line, "How could you do this to your own
own
kind?" I'm like,
kind.
"Whoa!"
Yeah,
So
they
right
just
from the start, we know this guy's a replicant. This is a story about a replicant learning if he's a human or not. And you get some people who are like, "Oh, well, they've done that story before." It's like, yes, it doesn't matter if they do certain stories before. What matters is how well you do that story. And they did a beautiful job with it.
not only that, but they gave it felt like a natural progression with the world that they had too. It felt like the world, has evolved since the original Blade Runner, but it felt like
Yeah.
it was a natural evolution. Whereas this one with the Matrix, I know with Resurrection, it's like, oh, we have the analyst now, and he created this Matrix and whatnot. And then you're like, I get that, but then quit trying to remind us of the better movie, which was the original movie.
Yeah.
Quit trying, and that's what some of legacy sequels do is they throw these scenes and go, remember when you saw this action scene? We're doing it again, only newer. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's still the same thing.
It's not new. It's the same shit. Yeah.
Give me something new. Give me something interesting. I mean, for as much as rough as Dial of Destiny was, as rough as it was,
Yeah.
not gonna say I enjoyed most of that more than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull
Yeah.
because that Dial of Destiny, it was different. It still had your legacy characters, but they brought new, different, interesting things in. You got them punching Nazis again, which is always fun.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but it's just that. But even then, nobody said after Last Crusade, "Oh man, I want to see more indie." No, it lived on in video games, which even the Animatrix, way back, one of the shorts in that was a setup for one of the video games. It was like the
Yeah.
prequel to the video game. I think it was the last short in that one with the Osiris. I think it was. Um,
Okay.
but in this one with Resurrection, it was like way too much callback.
Yeah.
You're trying to do something new. You've got a new Matrix. That's great. Let's stick with that.
Yeah.
Quit trying to bring back the old scenes, going, hey, remember this cool scene? And
Yeah.
remember this? It's like, no. Hey, look, it's Mr. Smith. Oh, yeah, no, Mr. Smith was just programmed to
Yeah.
be Morpheus, but he's really Agent Smith.
Yeah.
But
Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned Morpheus because most people don't know. And here's the benefit. Now, here's something Star Wars did, or Kathleen Kennedy did with Star Wars, which is she took all the expanded universe stuff and threw it in the garbage. And people were very mad about that. But then you get to the Matrix Online where Morpheus dies in it,
Mhm.
but nobody played that game. His death scene is laughable in it. And I had the clip, and it's like almost 2 minutes, so I don't want to play the full clip, And you have like, why would you kill Morpheus off in a video game that nobody sees, and then continue the next film where I guess Lawrence Fishburne reached out to Lana Wachowski, and she just wasn't interested in him coming on. So then she brings in this other guy who's just not Morpheus. He's just like a set of beads that floats around in the movie.
And don't get me
And
wrong, I like Glover. I like Glover quite a bit.
yeah,
I like the people in this film. I just didn't like the story. This,
yeah,
it's like you're scratching your head way too often.
Well, they just replay the story of the first film. It's, oh, here's
Yeah,
this guy. He wakes up. He doesn't know where he is. Oh, he realizes he's in the Matrix. And then once he realizes he's in the Matrix, he's not really like emotionally affected by it. He's just kind of like, oh, okay, here I am. Oh, I'm going through here. Like when he's walking around with Niobe
yeah.
and she's just like telling him about like all the things that happened. Like you said, like you would think something more would happen. You would think Zion would have grown more. It would have had more infrastructure. It would have been cleaner if the humans and the machines coexisted. But apparently nothing changed. Like everyone's still living in garbage and the machines are still blocking out the sky. What do they find like, for
Well,
instance, one way to undarken the sky and find a new energy source for the machines? There's like a whole story in between these 20 movies that would have made it a more interesting story than that movie. Like, how are we still in the Matrix? But they don't explore any of that, and they just fall back on nostalgia because that's all Lana Wachowski had. And I get it, you're making this movie for your parents, but you have to think about the audience too, and think about, is this really the best way to go?
yeah, it's there again, it's one of those where there's a lot of interesting ways you could go, and they take the path of least resistance, unfortunately. Seeing where Zion is, finding it interesting. They don't even really, I don't think there's any dialogue in Resurrections that addresses the fact that there's still a lot of people who chose to stay in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really address that. I don't remember at all. I watched it twice. I don't quite remember them ever like addressing, because that was the big thing at the end of, you had the architect, you had the oracle, and they're playing like, the two gods playing with humans. And they decide to give all the humans the choice of taking red pill or blue pill. And that's how Revolutions ended. You finally ended. You're like, oh, okay. And then in this one, they don't even address the fact that, yeah, a lot of people are still in the Matrix.
Well,
There's a lot of people
imagine
in it.
how amazing of a story that would be if it was about a guy who got unplugged from the Matrix when the machines decided to release everyone, and he wanted to go back. And it's like, tell that story about the guy who wants to go back. It could be a short film, and that could lead up to this. Like they could have led up to this movie. Like if
Or
they really wanted to use that whole expanded universe, they could have created like a whole media plan where it's like, here's like some new animatrixes, here's like a short Matrix series, and now we're leading up to the movie. And there's so much they could have explored, they just didn't.
here's what you could have done. How about you take it to where you still have the setting where the humans, things aren't as shiny and wonderful after everybody was given a choice to leave the Matrix as we thought it was going to be. And you have someone who was born naturally wanting to be put into the Matrix
Now there's
and
another
doing
character, yeah.
doing everything they can, and then they end up using a computer terminal or whatever and working with a person who's posing, who Agent Smith, who's posing as someone else, convincing the guy in the real world to do these things so that he could be part of the Matrix, when
Yeah.
actually he's doing it so Agent Smith can come out of the Matrix and sabotage everything. They could have done an angle like that,
Yeah, and
because the kid,
it could have been a Neil Patrick Harris character right there. Like someone who
it could
wanted to
have
be plugged
still
into the
been
Matrix and became the new architect.
right. It still could have been. And meanwhile, you've got Neo, wandering in there as well. You could still bring them in there in Trinity, looking at things and suddenly watching how things are changing. Things seem to be getting corrupted within the Matrix while they're in there patrolling or whatnot. And you find out that's because as the kid in the real world does these things that, the promiser is telling him to do, it's changing things within the Matrix that affects me. I mean, you could have did something like that.
Yeah. There's
You,
so many different avenues, so many stories, so many opportunities that these studios seem to not think about, whether it be Disney or Warner Brothers, whether it's the Snyderverse or whether it's the Star Wars universe or whether it's Marvel, where it's like, here are these things that we could explore, but we're gonna go for like the most obvious like angle in the story that the audience can latch onto, and nothing more complicated or interesting. And that's kind of where the movies fail.
Mhm.
Because if you did make a story about someone who does want to come back into the Matrix, maybe he could work with the guy who was unplugged in the Matrix, wants to go back, and the person who was naturally born. Like, you got two fascinating characters right there where it's like,
Mhm.
I want to see where this goes. And it's not just about the explosions and the gunfire and the kung fu, but rather about the idea of free will
Mhm.
and fate, which like all those are in the first one. You could really dig into those deeper. And that's the sad thing is like the Matrix is a deep ass action movie.
It is.
And the second one tries to be deep. And then the third one tries a little bit. And then by the fourth one, Lana's like, I'm sad. I'm gonna make this movie. And it just didn't it didn't pan out well. And that sucks. I hope the Wachowskis can find success. God only knows how many years later. Although I'm sure the money they made from these movies have paid them off for a lifetime of luxuries.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, they've tried other things. I mean, I personally
yeah,
enjoy their style. I liked
yeah.
Jupiter. I like Jupiter Ascending. I
I
thought
worked on it and I didn't even see it.
there was a lot of a lot of potential with that one. Like I said, Speed Racer, I think it's overlooked constantly.
Hmm.
If you look at what that film does and what people are doing today with films, that one was a little bit ahead of where it, when it came out. I think it was a little too early when it came out.
Hmm.
Um, so they're talented folks that come up with interesting stuff, and looking at it, I just want to pull it up quick. Resurrections did not make its money back.
Mm-mm,
Even
not even. No.
Revolutions made its money back.
Yeah.
Even as weak as it was, it still made twice its budget back.
Yeah. And then the next month, one of the greatest sequels of all time followed it, which was Return of the King.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
Then you had Return of the King come out.
yeah,
Yeah, it was an interesting time. It was an
that was the only
interesting
time I've
time.
been to a screening, I think, or like, gosh, I remember that screening. I went there, it was like a 9 p.m. showing, and it was sort of 3.5 hour film. And there were still lots of people in that theater to go see it,
Yeah,
you know.
but
But
the problem is they've just after V for Vendetta that
mhm.
it's their box office pull has not been there.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, they didn't direct that movie, but they wrote it, and I
they
feel
wrote
like
it,
that's yeah, I
but
feel like that's
yeah,
one of the best things they did because the director of that movie was just kind of a rented director, no particular style or real.
no, but I mean
Yeah,
that's the last one, I should say, the last project they were involved in that made money. Then they did Invasion, Speed Racer, Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, and Matrix Resurrection, and those all lost money.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and it's unfortunate because I think they have some great ideas and great things that they do, and visually they do some very cool stuff. I mean, say what you will about Cloud Atlas, the story visually, it was made for the big screen. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
cinematography wise and what they do with the screen is amazing
Some
in
of those
that
cuts
movie.
are amazing because they cut from like the future to like the 1600s in an instant. It's like some like 2001 bone
It
to
was.
space like fucking transitions that are mind blowing.
It was. So I mean, they know the craft is there. I just don't think there's stories that they come up with evolved with the audience to connect with people.
Yeah, I think they need
And
writers
they
like
need
more than
writers.
anything.
It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I think if they were given other someone else's like sci-fi script, they could do some wonderful things with it.
Mm, yeah.
I really, really do. But a lot of, most of the stuff that they've done is stuff they've written.
Yeah.
And you run into the M. Night problem.
Yeah.
M. Night. Shyamalan, I like his work to various degrees. Some of it I don't care for too much,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where I think sometimes the director, if they're too close to the material, it affects what they're making in a
Yeah.
not a great way, to where
I
it's
will
it's
say
almost too personal.
I kind of like it. Like, I kind of like it when movies are terrible more than them just being mediocre or mid, because at least like an M Night Shyamalan film is horrible, but you don't forget it because you're like, oh, I remember that stupid shit that they put in there. But then you see a movie that's kind of like mid, like Greenland 2, for instance, and I don't remember a thing from that movie. But I still remember the movie. I can't remember the name of it, but where like Josh Hartnett's like at a concert with his daughter, he's killing people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I still
Prey.
remember. Like,
Not Prey.
yeah,
Yeah, not Prey. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It came out a couple years ago. Yeah.
yeah, I still remember like that's like that close up of him doing that goofy smile. I still remember like he's standing by the stairs with his daughter and he casually just pushes some teenager down the stairs for no apparent reason. I remember all that.
Trap.
And
It was
I saw,
called
yeah,
Trap.
Trap. Yeah, I remember all those silly things about Trap. I remember burying my hands in my heads when my head in my hands when I saw, like the whole parking lot fight in
Oh,
Glass. But I don't remember a single thing about Greenland 2, and I saw that a few weeks ago. So at
see,
least the Matrix Resurrections fail so miserably where I remember some of the stuff from it.
I still remember the scenes from it,
Yeah.
from Resurrections. I remember most of the scenes from Resurrections. It just, I just remember the story being very mediocre, for this big return of these characters and this world for what they did. It felt path of least resistance as far as what we can do creatively.
Yeah.
And I understand where Lana was when this was written, but at the same time, maybe
Yeah.
needed to take a step back and go, well, maybe
Yeah.
make it a streaming direct to streaming
Ooh.
movie.
Yeah. I
You know
know.
what?
Find the codes to that. Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean, though. I mean, because
Yeah.
there's some bigger name films, especially nowadays, that end up going direct to streaming that you're like, this didn't go to the theater, and
Yeah.
then you're sitting there in the movie theater going, wait, this came to the theater when you thought it was
Yeah.
should probably go to the
Release Batgirl.
yes, release Batgirl.
So I think we're giving our final ratings for this because I'm about to head out to Planet Hoth and get some food for myself.
Yeah.
How many Guinnesses would you give The Matrix Resurrections?
I'm trying to remember what I originally rated it, but I think I'd give it now thinking about it some more, and that I think I'd give it two
Okay.
and a two.
No, wait, oops, wrong two. That's the right two.
There, yeah. I think I gave it 2.5 when I first watched it,
Okay.
2.5 or 3. But thinking about it more, yeah, I think 2.5 within that range is
Yeah.
fine. It's just, it's like,
Yeah,
you
I'm
know.
gonna be the neglectful one here. I'm giving it 1.5 out of 4. It really was just one of those experiences where I couldn't believe it was as bad as it was when I saw it. And then when I came back, yeah, just each time it's painful. It's just a painful experience. It's just like what and the fact that they kind of decanonized what already happened.
Mhm.
Like we had Neo dead, we had the war over. If you wanted to continue with the story, get a new Neo. There's been
Or make
6 before, anyways.
or make Neo the MacGuffin. Make
Yeah.
it like something's going on with the Matrix. We need the one back, and you're like, no, pull a Luke Skywalker in Force Awakens.
Hmm.
Do a thing to where Neo's still in the code somewhere.
At least that projection would mean something more than than Luke Skywalker ODing on the Force. But yeah,
Uh,
I don't know. When it comes to me, the Last Jedi, it's like every critic likes the Last Jedi, but me. I'm like the fans when it comes to the Last Jedi, but
well,
that's
I know
okay.
some fans that really like Last Jedi. Again,
Yeah,
why I didn't like everything about Last Jedi. I still enjoyed a lot of it, but more importantly, I was gonna enjoy the fresh ideas they were trying to bring
Mm,
to Star Wars to give it an update. Because that's the thing, if you're going to do a legacy sequel, do something in there that's updating the older concepts you have, because those concepts don't exactly work in today's modern age. So dust it off and give it a new angle, give it
yeah,
something new. And that's what Last Jedi was trying to do. I didn't read too much into it of, what the script fully was. I didn't dig that much into it before Rise or after Rise of Skywalker, where someone said, here's the original plan. I saw some parts of it, of what they had planned, which sounded far more interesting. But you could tell at the end of The Last Jedi, what they were leaning towards and what the first two films were building towards was, there isn't good or bad anymore. There isn't Sith or Jedi. There are just Force sensitive users, and how they use the Force determines that, but they aren't necessarily Sith or Jedi anymore. And I liked that idea. I thought that was fitting, that was the next step to take in philosophy of, well, there's a lot more gray Jedi. And you see that in Ahsoka a bit. We saw that
mm,
kind of concepts in Ahsoka with, and not to make this about Star Wars, but just saying that you see that idea of folks who aren't exactly Sith, but they aren't exactly Jedi either. They're using the Force for, you know, either way. And that, I think, is something that you could explore and be far more interesting
yeah,
than going back to, oh, look, Sith, Jedi
yeah.
again.
Yeah. I
You
Here's the
know,
thing with The Last Jedi. I think it had a lot of great ideas. I just didn't think the tone, the execution, and the structure was necessarily well thought out. And I don't blame Ryan Johnson as much as I blame like maybe Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney execs, where they were telling Ryan, "Okay, hurry up. We need a picture. We need it now." And that's when we kind of got like this era of comedies for like when they started with a "Your Mama" joke. I was like, "Wait, what?" And then when they like cartoonishly stopped the music when Luke throws the lightsaber, I'm like, I like what that scene was going for, but there's so many ways you could have done that where you didn't have to turn it into a womp womp moment. And those are sort of like the things that turn me off. But I like the idea that, yes, you don't have to be a Skywalker, you don't have to be a Palpatine, you could be a nobody and you could possess the Force. You could be the broom kid at the end and possess the Force. Like, I liked all of that. But yeah, and yeah, just some of the stuff with the structure, especially with
mhm.
the whole
But
Canto Bite stuff. But yeah.
But well, and that's the weakest part of that film that I'll even admit, even though I thoroughly enjoy Last Jedi, I don't like the Canto stuff either. There's different ways they could have handled that, but just like, with the Matrix series as well, take your ideas and do something new with them. And
Hmm.
no, not everybody may like it, but it's at least different, and you're giving it a purpose.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where Resurrection really fell, was you watch it and you go, why?
Yeah.
Why is any of this? And
Which is what
I
Neil
was,
says in the thumbnail. Yeah.
what's what he says in this thumbnail, but it's a good thing. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why are we back here?
The
And I don't think producers and studios always ask that question, besides money.
Mhm.
Narrative wise, you want a good reason to bring these folks back, especially
Yeah.
after all they go through in the first three films. You want a good reason to bring Neo and Trinity back. It's not that you don't want to see them, but give me a reason to care again. Give me a reason besides, oh, remember that cool time when she flipped over this and did this? And it's like,
Yeah.
what about
And now we're gonna have
now?
a character talk about why that was cool, and we had Neil Patrick Harris talk about bullet time to the audience. Like, we don't need this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we're on the same page. Unnecessary, but the Matrix does have potential for a future. But I think they should look more into the Animatrix and the expanded universe for what that future could be, and
You
lay
could
off
do
the Neo.
you could do what they did with Star Wars, because look,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say Kathleen. I'm not a full defender of Kathleen Kennedy. I think a lot of people, it's easy for folks to just throw the hate at her.
Oh yeah.
When Kathleen actually also brought a lot of big, great movies to Disney as well. Sure, may have stumbled with Star Wars, but we're still talking about Star Wars in part because of what she did. Good, bad, or ugly, you talked about Star Wars.
She gave us Andor, which might even be better than The Empire Strikes Back.
We got Andor and we got The Mandalorian, at least the first couple seasons, and then The Mandalorian got too much. They didn't know what to do with it. And that's the thing is, it's not necessarily, it's easy to pick on her because, yes, she was in charge of it, but at the same time, you have the talent underneath that it's not all going to be bangers.
Yeah.
You know, and for every book of Boba Fett you have an Andor. For every you know, for every one of these later seasons of Mandalorian, you've got the Clone Wars, you've got Rebels. You know, I mean, it's like you have good and bad. People like to focus on the bad. I think just the sheer fact of, because I've grown up on Star Wars since I was 2.5 years old, and I first saw the movie in the theater. That was the very first movie I ever saw in my life at 2.5 years old was Star Wars. So it's been ingrained in my DNA. So folks who might say I'm not a fan, whatever. I've lived with Star Wars for a long time.
You were born into it. I was born in the theater with Star Wars.
You're going to be watching Star Wars. I was born in it.
I actually want to find like there's got to be like people who like went through labor and gave birth while Star Wars was playing. I want to see those stories.
You know, and it's wild to think that we're still talking Star Wars or even Star Trek, properties that when I was a kid, I didn't think would, especially Star Wars after Jedi, you're like, oh, okay, that was it. You had the toy lines and that, and then you had cartoons and such, but it's like no more. And then the prequel, it's like special editions, and you're just like, why'd you do that, George? Why?
Yeah.
You know, and it took off from there, but we're sitting here practically 50 years later. We're a year away from it hitting 50.
Wow.
And that's crazy for any genre property.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And good, bad, or ugly that you think of Kathleen Kennedy, she got the properties, she kept it active, she kept it in the zeitgeist. And you know, and that was almost as important because, like you said, something bad is going to be far more memorable than something mediocre.
Exactly. Yeah. Mediocre movies are mediocre. Like mediocre is like the definition of forgetting something pretty much.
Nobody sets out to make a bad movie, but the fact that it's bad and you're still talking about it for years later on threads and forums.
It did something right.
As Bella said in Ed Wood, Eddie, in Hollywood, there is no bad press.
Yeah, exactly. There is no bad press, Eddie. I love that. That was like Tim Burton's best movie. I think Tim Burton's that was his favorite.
That is one of his top best movies. Absolutely.
And we have a couple comments. I don't know if this is a human or a bot, but we have
at work right now.
Midarami at work, but I'll pull up for your next stream. Add me on Discord. I certainly will. At Raider Kelly. Okay, Raiders. See, when I think of Raiders, I'm thinking of Fallout because I've been playing that. And now that's how you do an adaptation. You're doing a great job with that show, but I don't want to keep watching the show.
I gotta watch that season 2 yet. I gotta watch season 2 of Fallout. But season 1
I kind of want to finish New Vegas before I finish season 2 because there's like so many things in New Vegas that are in season 2. But I'm playing it on PC and it constantly crashes because
I'm playing Elden Ring right now, so that's a time sink. I've already put in about 70 hours into that game.
Because like I continued my Fallout save from like 2 years ago or something.
Sure.
And I already sunk like 20 hours or 30 hours into it then. And I'm like, I don't want to go back. And then I sunk in like 50 hours or something. And it's like 70 hours. And a lot of that time is just the game crashing and burning. And I know I can put in mods to fix it, but I don't want to break my game doing it and lose all my data. because I did have that happen with Deus Ex where I played like 80 hours of it, and then like all the data just got wiped.
Oof,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
rough. That's
yeah.
rough, man.
That's what happens when you use PCs.
Yeah. Just plug in like the Matrix. There you go.
Exactly. Oh, they have glitches everywhere. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on. I want to plug it in the Matrix right now so I can go somewhere tropical, away from all this snow. Can I go somewhere tropical and get like
Sure.
mimosa, and
Sure, there you go.
then
We'll put you on the beach. Nice weather, permanent sunset. It's at like half sunset. There you go.
Agent Smith sees me there, Mr. Crowley.
And you'll just
Like,
go, dude, just have a
I
Corona.
plugged
It'll be like, oh
I
yeah.
plugged back in. It's okay.
He'll come up and go, Mr. Crowley. You go, here, have a Corona. And then it'll be like you're both sitting on the beach and you just clink the Coronas and the Corona logo comes up and there you go. You
That's the
got
next
your
Corona
sponsorship.
ad. We started a pandemic. Oh wait, no, that's a different Corona. All right. Well, guys, if you liked what you saw, please hit subscribe, like, comment. I think you guys know the drill. You can find all my stuff on social media at YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. And if you liked Mark, you can check out all of his stuff at Special Mark Productions. His information is in the description below. Until then, we will see you in the Matrix, or if we're not already in it. We certainly feel like we're living in a
I took
simulation.
both pills, so I'm gonna have to lay down for a while.
Oh man, that's gonna be a trip. You're gonna actually be seeing code. That's how you do it.
How you do it?
Yeah, man. Maybe it's the same potency Dr. Kelson used for Samson. I don't know. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. And we